I want to make sure that we make the most of the time with a little bit of delay. So just going to take us right into the session and basically starting off with you, Valérie, Senior Policy Officer at Ellen MacArthur Foundation, to take the floor and get us going with this particular Fashion Zero agenda priority. Over to you, Valérie.
Hi, Jonas. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me or us today. So indeed, I work for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We are a charity operating globally and working on the circular economy. And I suppose this would be perhaps where we start today, because this session is called Circular Systems. And I guess when we hear the word circular, we think about decoupling immediately. So decoupling the way we make revenues, decoupling our economic activity from the consumption of finite resources. So that's sort of the horizon that we're aiming at. Now, what does a circular economy actually mean? What is this circular system, as this session is titled, that we're trying to build? What is that? What are we trying to achieve? To answer that question, we have published a vision last year, which was called A Vision of a Circular Economy for Fashion, just to try to sort of sketch out and create that understanding of what it is that we're moving towards. And three key principles emerged there. The first one is that in a circular economy, products are used more. I think especially in fashion, short-lived products tend to be. So can we make sure we actually use them more? We change the business models that are now orientated towards maximizing flow, maximizing volumes, but actually putting the use principle at heart. And also making sure that, of course, not only we make our products, we design them so they're made to last, but we also take them back and recirculate them in practice. The second principle is that fashion products would then be made to be made again, so they can effectively be disassembled, to be reused, to be remade, eventually to be recycled as well. And then the third principle is all about material inputs. So I think quite logically, having safe, hi, I see Alice Jones, hi Alice, having safe material inputs, making sure that we don't have hazardous substances nor those chemical legacies when circulating our products, but also tackling microfibers, for example, making sure that when these could be harmful, they do not reach the environment by collection or by design interventions. But I think through and through, and essentially, it is really about minimizing the use of virgin material input. So reducing pressure on the system by ensuring that we use the products and materials we have to the maximum extent. We use recycled inputs, and where we do use virgin ones, that those are sourced from renewable feedstocks. Now, I think we all know the saying that Rome was not built in a day. So I suppose that also goes for the circular economy. It's a system change. And not only do we need this shared understanding of where we're going, but also a shared understanding of how to get there. And of course, the role for policy is crucial there. So we've tried to think about, what can policy do concretely? What would be the goals, the steps to take? And we've identified 5 policy goals. We published those under the title of Universal Circular Economy Policy Goals. I know there are 5, not just one goal, so it all sounds a bit complicated and perhaps quite unsexy in a way. But we think that's simply what's needed. It's really a mix of measures. So working on upstream, thinking about design, making sure we have a minimum level at least of what circular design means in product policies. But also investing in creating the systems, the resource management systems, basically, harmonizing the way we collect and sort, because that happens in very, very different ways across geographies. Thinking about the secondary material inputs, making sure they're actually standardized and that they meet the same standards across. But also a third goal is what we call making the economics work. So policy can play a crucial role in reviewing basically, market incentives, but also regulations, simply making it easier for business models to shift towards models that operate according to the sort of maximizing use principle, and that look at making sure products are used more and not just maximizing the turnover of these products. Of course, investing in infrastructure and skills. We need to bridge certain skills gaps if we think about repair, for example. And a fifth goal relates to the collaboration that is needed. So between industry and policymakers, but also across governance. We see often these policy measures are limited to the environment portfolio. So how can we ensure that actually policymakers within their government or within their institutions work together? So maybe to come back to Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour. I was told this is actually the full, the full expression. So that collaboration is all about indeed making sure that when we lay those bricks, when we build those foundations, that we do it together and in dialogue. And I'll end on that note. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valérie.
Alice, I will turn over to you.
Yes.
So relieved to see you. And sorry again for all the technical hiccups, but the panel is going, so over to you, Alice.
Thank you so much. It was great to have you as a stand-in for some terrifying moments there. So we move on for the next speaker who has his minutes to do his best. And it is Christos Kyriatzis, a senior expert at the Commission. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Alice. Can you hear me all? Thank you for the invitation. While I listened carefully to Valérie's points, and I mean, these are all points that we want to touch upon in the preparation and the future strategy for sustainable textiles. And this is mainly my purpose of participating today, to give you a state of play. You remember that the strategy for textiles was already announced for the first time in the European Green Deal, and then in the Circular Economy Action Plan and the Industrial Strategy that days ago. We have launched the 12th of May an open public consultation, which will run until the 4th of August. And you will see different policy options in the survey, in the questionnaire, where you can give us your input and ideas and suggestions in order to shape the strategy, since we always said that we want to base it on input from all stakeholders. We are also planning to organize a series of dedicated workshops. I know that my colleagues in DG Environment are leading this exercise, and we are leading in DG. Organize already the first event the next week, and then there is another one, the 2nd of June, on the international dimension of the textile ecosystem. And then I would like to pass on the second point, which is linked to skills. Very important for the circular systems of the future. We are working already since 2018 on a project which is called the Blueprint for Skill Cooperation in Textiles with organizations in the European Union, in order to update the training and curricula offered to better match industry needs. And this project will run until mid-2022. And also, following the new European Skills Agenda that was launched in last November 2020, one of the ecosystems with an area of work was the textiles ecosystem. We organized a high-level roundtable in the month of March with Commissioners Breton and Commissioner Schmidt and the relevant organizations. And now we are working for probably a pact of skills to be presented. I don't know the exact timing, but it could be at the end of the year, in order to accompany the workforce to the digital and green transition, and also take into account that there is an aging workforce, which is very relevant, and we don't want to lose their knowledge, but be able also to replace and update their knowledge and skills for the future. One of the final point I would make, my intervention is short, it is that one of the points is to attract investments, research and innovation on technologies that will accompany this whole exercise, both from the digital part, the green part, and also the resilience of the sector following the COVID crisis. I will stop here for the time being, but if there are questions, I'm happy to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Christos, and I would like to encourage the audience to write questions in the Q&A chat at the right of your screen. So please do that, and hopefully we will have some minutes in the end to answer them. And now we continue. Now it's Jérôme Perrault, SG of FESI, and on behalf of the Policy Hub Circularity for Apparel and Footwear. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Alice, and thank you also to the previous speakers. Thank you very much for this invitation for this very impressive event. So, as Alice mentioned, I'm Jérôme Perrault. I'm the Secretary General of FESI, which represents all the sports brands, retailers, and manufacturers operating in Europe in the leisure, outdoor, and sports sector, of course. But today I'm speaking as one of the founding partners of the Policy Hub, which was created to accelerate the circularity within the apparel and footwear sector, and to propose some ideas and policies. Circular systems is quite a broad topic, and I think the Commission and many stakeholders are having their heads really digging very deep into all the technicalities of the discussions for the time being. But today I will address 3 key topics, because we only have 4 minutes. But please note that all of the aspects that I'm addressing are also further developed in various position papers that are published on the website of the Policy Hub, which is policyhub.org, and you can definitely find out more about all of our positions. So first of all, I think when we're talking about circular systems, and I think Valérie mentioned already a lot of things that I'm going to mention, is design. So as Valérie mentioned already, I think it's very important that we have harmonized definitions of what circular and sustainable products and business models actually are, especially in our sector. And from a Policy Hub standpoint, with our respective members, we are very interested in engaging into this discussion and leading discussions when it comes to detailing harmonized definition of circular products in the textile, apparel, and footwear industry. Of course, always considering its purpose and use. Another concept within design that is very important is to have a holistic approach. One should not only focus on one aspect within the entire value chain of a product. We have to take multiple, I would say, contributions and trade-offs into account that could minimize waste or climate impact. And I think that there are many aspects that can have tangible benefits, including, for example, designing for a more sustainable production by minimizing waste and making use of byproducts such as material scraps. We can also design for more durable, long-lasting products, for products that can be repaired and refurbished, and also design for cyclability, which includes recyclability in some cases, but also compostability. This all in a holistic approach. So that's for the first part on design. The second one, of course, is waste. I think it's very important that policymakers keep in mind that textile waste in the end should really be considered as a resource when it comes to secondary raw materials. And to allow this, we really feel that there should be huge investments made in new infrastructures and technologies, and that, especially for sustainable textile waste management in Europe, we will really need to scale up many of the initiatives that are currently happening and that are very interesting, but we need this to happen at a very, I would say, scalable stage. We also, to encourage this and to feed this entire upscaling, we urge the Commission to consider EU-wide harmonized EPR schemes. We know that there are many EPR schemes being developed at various national levels with very different scopes, very different objectives. So here there's a lot of harmonization to be done as much as possible, and we really strongly encourage a discussion around harmonization. Otherwise, it's too burdensome for companies to keep up. And of course, to dig deep into the definition of textile waste and end of waste criteria, so that we can really incentivize market uptake of high quality secondary raw materials, which in the end will really be the key enablers to create this circular system. But also keeping in mind, and that was also mentioned previously, that we're talking about a global value chain and not only about Europe, which is of course not an island, but we're operating in a very global scale. The last one, and I'll finish there, is of course we need to find ways of supporting and incentivizing all the various actors that are circulating in the circularity ecosystem, whether they are SMEs or startups. We need to incentivize those. We need to incentivize all these companies and service providers that are actually working towards repairing, towards different business models such as rental, resale, sharing services, so that we can engage them much more and find investments and fundings to really scale up all of these bright, innovative ideas that are being developed. And one of the aspects that we can also maybe discuss, and I know that this maybe include another DG, but that would be to recommend some type of incentives for VAT reductions when it comes to circular business models and or textiles with circular attributes. So that's it for me. I'm happy to address any questions here during the Q&A or at a later stage offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have only 2 questions in the chat and in the Q&A box. And there are so many of you listening in. And if you don't have any questions, maybe you have thoughts or ideas or comments, please put them in the Q&A box. Because now we only have 2 speakers left. And the next one who will get the floor is Rüdiger, CEO for Sympatex Technologies. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice, and I really enjoy being here. First of all, I want to express that we are totally enthusiastic about this project because, first of all, we believe that combination of DG Grow and DG Environment can showcase a harmonized approach to a topic which typically has been rather an area of confrontation and trying to find compromises. This one might lead really to an exemplary case where we can show that both can support each other. Those people who know us, we are trying since, especially in the last 5 years, really to rather playfully than seriously trying to close the loop and figuring out how this works, what we all talk about, which is circularity. And we believe, and we honestly hope that the Commission will be radical enough and not compromise, because I believe that we will grow with the ambition. I think we cannot set the targets high enough, especially because we have some time to catch up in our industry compared to everybody else. On the other side, we can show what's possible. At the same time, regulations will provide a level playing field, and I believe a lot of us have the ambition to do better, especially on the brand side. But the competitive landscape and the freedom to act differently doesn't lead us, or doesn't, let's say, allow us on an easy way to go that trajectory. When I look at the system approach, and I very much enjoyed also what you said, Valérie and Jérôme, your first point, our experience is we need to start where the process starts. And I want to raise this as pretty much the fundamental point with perhaps three smaller points on this. But if we don't start with the design, we will continue providing apparel, clothing, textile in the market, which will end up in a few years for recycling process and create a hurdle for the recycling part. Secondly, I believe, especially if from the textile side, from the design side, from the brand side, if we don't constrain our design freedom on materials that can be recycled, and that can actually be a really harsh limitation, we will not really start to put apparels in the environment, in the market, which then at the end of their lifetime can be easily recycled. And then we leave the problem to the recycling industry to clean up our mess. So I think that's where the process needs to start, in really a clear definition of what is allowed to bring in the market. One condition being, for example, that only materials can be used that go in circularity. What we have experienced, and that sounds first of all like a restriction, innovation emerges when there are restrictions to the complete freedom and randomness of design. So we have really seen that the more we put the focus on solving the problem and the more clear the boundaries are for our activities, the easier it will be and the faster we will find solutions. We probably also need a clear definition of what is actually recyclability, what means design for recyclability. We'll probably pretty soon come to a let's say, focus on as little material variance in our products as possible. That is at least the experience we made. We experimented on the one side with mechanical recycling, on the other side with chemical. we saw the more complex the composition of material, the more difficult it will be to take them apart. And perhaps as a last point, and I know my 4 minutes already gone much too fast, but as a last point, we would really like to encourage the Commission to look as specifically the polyester products, because not only they create the big part of the problem, but about 80%, if the MacArthur's data are correct, I have in memory, about 80% of our industry is polyester, and it is easy for recycling. So we would really encourage the Commission to really set clear recycling and circularity targets for 2025, 2030. Thank you.
Much, Rüdiger. And you get what you ask for, and now we have several questions in the Q&A box, so I encourage the speakers to answer them in written, or when we have maybe 5 minutes left in the end, then you take responsibility to be very short and answer as many of them as possible. But now, for our last speaker, I give the floor to Harsh Saini, EVP Sustainability at Fung Group. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice. I'm representing the Fung Group, which is headquartered in Hong Kong and has a very diverse portfolio of businesses centered around major manufacturing hubs around the world. Our companies operate across entire global supply chains in trading, in logistics, distribution, and retail, with a wide range of consumer goods, including cosmetics, furniture, and of course, apparel and footwear. So the impact to our business, which is largely offshore to Europe, so the impact of the European legislation to us is very, very important, and really understanding how we close the loop from where we are based in the world and make our contribution to circular systems. So I want to draw attention to a number of areas which are very important to those of us who are based offshore but who import goods into the European area. So we have the GFA Fashion Agenda, which has, I think, done a very good job of aligning our industry on circularity, working with amazing partners out there, like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and others. But the way we look at it is that our industry really relies on multiple other industries for it to operate. And it would be great to hear from policymakers how their outreach is taking place to ensure that key areas such as energy, chemicals, logistics, and so on are fully engaged and aligned at an intergovernmental level in these offshore production countries. And then, of course, that they therefore are primed to support the apparel industry to meet the EU requirements for implementation of circular systems. We're also very interested to hear about, once we start to move to circular systems, there will be a lot of opportunities created all along the supply chains and value chains. There are also going to be challenges for workers in developing countries. So as part of a forward strategy, what are the policymakers' thoughts regarding how to uplift as many companies, as many of the players, especially the workers, as we move forward? And then finally, I think for us, the important area is understanding what the Commission is doing to ensure that the requirements, the legislation that's coming into play in the very near future will be able to bring offshore businesses along the journey with it, with a level playing field, and not increase obstacles for offshore businesses to play and to be a part of the very important industry in Europe.
Thank you so much. And now all the speakers have had their minutes, and now there are a lot of questions in the Q&A box, and that's great. So now I will give the floor to each one of you again for a very short time, some seconds, answer one of the questions, and hopefully you can take responsibility for answering them all. So first out to answer one of the questions is Valérie. Please, you can choose one from the Q&A box.
That's a nice approach. Thank you, Alice. Yeah, there was one question for me on microplastics. I'll try to be very brief. I think we see two main sort of intervention points, design and collection. So on the one hand, we're not too sure about, to what extent does the characteristic of the fiber, but also the construction of the fabric affect microfiber release. So what interventions could we take on the design level? And there's a lot of research needed to really establish, what would make sense, what would be most impactful. And actually the same for collection. So, I mean, you could think of upstream filters at manufacturing level. You could think about downstream filtering in washing machines and so on. But again, we don't have the full data at the moment in terms of causes and impacts of microfiber release. So I think that would be the way to start, gathering all the evidence, and then on that basis, building those measures on both design and collection level.
Thank you, Valérie. And Christos, which question do you want to answer? Christos, can you hear me? Your microphone is off. Oh, but the picture is also gone. Okay, then we go to Jérôme. Choose one. Choose a question to answer.
There's so many, it's difficult. I know there are two specifically aimed for me, but I'll respond to those in written. Perhaps I'll take this one from Toby Connock. I hope I say this correctly. So he's asking, how do you currently propose to leverage EPR policy to drive reuse in preference to recycling, given the greater associated environmental benefits? Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a great question. And this is what I was addressing when I was talking about harmonizing EPR schemes all over Europe, because you have various EPR schemes that are much more focused on secondhand, for example, whereas others are trying as much as possible to focus on recycling, although for the time being mainly on downcycling to be used in other industries and sectors. So I think, it really depends on the availability of technologies and things like that. So at the end, it's really a level of complementarity that needs to be found between reuse, secondhand, and when it's not possible, recycling. So indeed, we should not only focus on recycling. It's not the silver bullet. It's part of the solution. So I would say this needs to be discussed at European level. We need to have EPR guidelines which are being developed, and we need to have sector-specific EPR guidelines. And happy to take more ideas and to bring discussions around the table.
Thank you so much. It's almost as if we have prepared this, but we haven't, this quick round and all the questions. So I move on to Rüdiger. Can you answer one or maybe several questions?
Yes, I'd love to answer a lot of them, but let's pick, I think it's the first one from Maria, with a question of the mass momentum and how we inform consumers on circularities and how should the education be financed. Well, I dare to say I love the question and I think it's very important. Nevertheless, from an industry perspective, I would say we need to be very careful in making change dependent on change in consumer behavior, because that's the best excuse we can get not to change anything. My perspective is simply, I think circularity makes a lot of sense even for the industry, independent of moral reason, ecological reason, and consumer behavior change. So that's why our focus is clearly, let's make it economically successful with a lot of positive side effects for everybody, ideally invisible for the end consumer, so we don't make it dependent on it. So that's why we focus really not too much making this a condition for the transformation.
Thank you. Quite brave coming from the industry, I say, being a politician. And I think it's great that these forces to really make a change is there, because we know what's needed to save this planet. So I go to Harsh. Do you have any favorite questions from the Q&A box?
They're flooding in now, but I'm going to maybe try to elaborate on a question about enhancing relationships between manufacturers and brands to bring about a more equitable future. I think this touches back to, it's not just the manufacturers and brands, but also policymakers. And especially with what I was talking about earlier is for those of us who are based, who are in the manufacturing arena, it would be good to have more visible discussions with policymakers and brands as a truly as a true roundtable to really discuss what are the impacts of policy that are coming up on what will impact, how they will impact the manufacturers in some of the developing countries, and that the policies are developed with a very honest and clear input from manufacturers together with brands, because there is already close relationships with, between brands and manufacturers, but to really help policymakers to understand at a much more visible level the challenges that arise from even a slight change in policy that takes place in another part of the world where we rely on for our business.
And I see that Christos is back. So Christos, I will direct one question to you. One person asked about where this, now can I see where I have it? Oh, there are so many questions. Okay, we take the last one. Malin Wennberg asked, today terms such as sustainable, recycle, circular is often used in marketing. Will we see stricter rules on how these terms can be used in this B2C? Business to consumer, I think, is the right way to say it. Christos, what do you think, coming from the legislative side?
It's not very clear, so I did not hear correctly the question, I believe.
The first question, the last question, I mean, in the Q&A box from Malin Wennberg. Do you see it?
The last question I have is from Maria Kalibos.
Oh.
So there is a problem.
Okay.
But I already know. I saw first a question which concerns the time of publication of the strategy, since the public consultation runs until the 4th of August. I don't know the exact moment of the publication. It was announced for Q3, Q3 of this year. It might move a little bit to Q4, but I believe it will be in any case before the end of the year. I saw also another question to the committee, the involvement of consumer behavior, and I wanted to remind that as we said on several instances, the policy we want to develop, it will contain horizontal actions undertaken also by other services. For example, we are working closely with DG on consumer empowerment, on behavior, on due diligence and other issues. Also, for me, these questions, it will be important to get a set of stakeholder public consultation, because, for example, for the recycling, development of recycling capacity is something that we are passing to the Commission and also other stakeholders and authorities. So it's something broader to which even answer on this concrete.
Thank you, Christos, and thank you to all of our speakers and for all of you who put questions in the Q&A box. And I'm sure that several of our speakers, I mean, Jérôme, you volunteered, you will answer some of them in written. So please do. And thank you for the engagement. Soon, 3:30, the next session will start, Smart Material Choices. You can be here during that. Maybe put some, I mean, the speakers and the participants who want to stay until then can interact via the chat box. So please do so. But thank you for participating. And I'm sure that several of us will meet in or around tables where we discuss what's coming up and how to make this planet and our businesses and our way of living and consuming sustainable. So thank you so much and take care. Bye-bye.